there, my name's Nicole with So Much More, and in this video I'm going to be taking this mini quilt. Now I made this mini quilt at a retreat. I quilted it in, I think it was last week's session on our live feed, and now we're going to trim this quilt and we're going to bind it. So let's get started. All right, this quilt, this little mini quilt, or a wall quilt, whatever you want to call it, is about 24 by 24. It's perfect size for a little corner on your home decor, in your sewing space. And of course, I made it in the colors that I had scraps of, and it really goes well together. I have Bubblegum, which these are all the names of the fabrics that I use. I carry these fabrics in my shop. Bubblegum, Sangria, and it looks like white, but it's not. It's a pale pink. And so on the last video, we quilted it. We did straight line quilting. It's all quilted. The back looks really nice. This is also from my shop. The color is silver. And I just love the way it turned out. Now the binding, we kind of had some conversation going on in the last video, and we're going to bind this with the Sangria, was the overwhelming consensus. And this is Sangria. It's the same color as this. But first we're going to trim the quilt, and then we're going to make our binding. So I have my straight edge ruler here. And I'm going to be lining this up with the bottom of this quilt, going off to the side. And I want to make sure that I'm 1/4 of an inch away from my points there, right? Give myself enough room. That looks good. And then I'm just going to cut all the way down here so I can have that bit come off and then make a cut. I'm going to keep my ruler in the down position. I'm not moving my ruler. I'm sorry, I'm not moving my rotary cutter. It's still down, but I am moving my ruler. Going to keep it aligned down here and then extend it. There we go. I'm going to do that to all the sides. I want to make sure I have 1/4 of an inch here off to the side. Nice. All right, so now I've got this all squared up. Is it square? Look, 24 by 24. Looks pretty good, okay? I'm going to set this aside because I'm going to cut my binding. Now, I'm going to need about 3 strips of binding. So I'm going to cut it with the fabric. And I like to make my binding 2.5 is easiest. I'm just going to line up this side right here. Give myself a nice edge. And then I'm going to align that to my 0, 0 mark, or at least this edge. And then the rest of my cuts I can just do at 2.5 inches. Now before I put these together end to end, I'm going to put my grid glider mat on. I didn't put it on since I came back from retreat, so I used this machine at retreat. And I pack it up and take it on and put it off and all those things. So I'm just lining it up with everything here. I'm trying to find my 5/8 mark. There we go. All right, and the reason I'm doing this is so I can use this middle line right here to put my pieces together end to end. I could draw lines or kind of wing it, but I'm going to use the lines on this mat. So let me show you how that works. Okay, so there is this middle line right here, and it's aligned with the hole in the needle plate right there. And so when I put these 2 pieces of fabric together, I like to do it on the diagonal. And so I put them together like this, and then I'm going to sew from here to here. Now I could draw a line, right, with like a marker. It's a sewing line, but I'm going to align it with this needle hole right here, and then I'm going to use the line on my grid glider for the rest of it. So let me show you that. Just going to align it like that. Make sure that where these two pieces of fabric meet is where that line is. Let me just adjust this a little bit. And then I'm going to change my sewing machine so that it does a reverse stitch on the start and the stop. And I'm going to turn my speed down. So as it goes, I'm just making sure that that's all aligned. Now what I didn't do is change my stitch length. My stitch length is still set on a quilting stitch length, so it's way too big. This is going to be okay for right now, but I'm going to change it back down to 2.4. So that is how that works. It gives you a nice diagonal line, and then we're going to continue and add one more piece to it. We don't have to make a lot of binding because this is just a 24 by 24 piece wall quilt. So again, I'm just adding it like this. Then I'm going to use the line that's on my grid glider to put these together. All right, so now I'm going to see how that looks really nice. I'm just going to trim off the excess. I still haven't unpacked my retreat bag. This has just about everything I need right next to my sewing machine still inside my bag. All right, so just trim those off. And then trim these off as well. Now you could open these seams up with your iron, but I don't have my iron right next to me. And I do have my seam roller next to me. At least I thought I did. Yep, here it is. So I'm going to use my seam roller instead. And we're just going to roll these, we're just going to roll this seam flat. So just open that up, take my seam roller and roll it flat. I'll probably hit it again with an iron because I'm going to head back over to my ironing board. I still need to iron this bit of binding together. There we go. Let's head over to the ironing board again, and we're gonna make quick work of this. I'll press this, and then I'm gonna iron this together like this to get it ready to put on our mini quilt. All right, this should be really quick. Now I'm going to hit this with starch one more time because this next seam or this next press that I want to make, I want this fabric to stay put. You know, sometimes when you iron your binding, it just, you know, it makes the crease, but it doesn't stay. And I felt like if you press it with some starch, that you're going to have a better chance of not having that binding unfolding. Usually you won't lose your crease, but I like to have it nice and flat. And that's what it's doing right now. It's giving me a nice flat, very, very nice. All right. All right, so our mini quilt and our binding, that's all ready to go. Gosh, how pretty is that going to be, right? Love it. All right, I'm going to find the end. We're going to just make sure that I have enough and that wherever I put this binding, I don't really want to hit a corner where I've got the two binding to join. I hate that. So I'm just kind of plotting it out. I'm not pinning anything, but I'm just kind of plotting it out, right? So if I need to adjust how we started, then I can do those adjustments. I'm going to start right here. So first things first, I need to change my presser foot here. So I'm going to change to a 1/4 inch presser foot. I'm sewing the binding to the front of the quilt, and then I'm going to flip it over to the back. So I'm using my DX 4000 from Juki. It's called the Kokachi, and it comes with lots of feet, but I'm going to get the 1/4 inch foot. So I'm going to switch that out. This 1/4 inch foot has one of those little, I guess it's called a hinge. I'm not sure if that's the right word, but this right here helps me achieve a 1/4 inch seam allowance, and that's kind of what I want for that binding, so when I attach it. So I'm going to take off my walking foot, push that button down to release my straight stitch foot, and then I'm going to add this foot. Oops, there we go. I didn't align that correctly, did I? There we go. Okay. So now my 1/4 inch foot is on there. I'm not going to worry about the color of my thread because right now I'm just attaching the binding. I might have to change my thread cutter color in a minute. I need to engage my walking foot. There we go. I always forget to do that. And I'm not going to be doing the reverse stitch when I start. I just want to start. And I'm going to start slow. And I'm using my start stop button instead of my foot pedal. I just like to do that right here. It's easy for me. So that's why you see me pushing that up here. All right, I just have a regular stitch length. It's a 2.4. I'm going too slow. So I'm going to speed up. This little guy right here speeds it up towards the bunny. Speed it up a little bit. Now, I see myself coming to this corner, and I'm going to prepare for that, right? When I get up to about right here, I'm going to do some turning, so we'll take a look at that in just a second. I'm going to slow down. All right, my needle's in the down position. I'm going to raise up my presser foot, and I'm going to get this binding over here. I'm going to pivot the quilt, and then I'm going to raise up my needle and raise up my foot. And then I haven't cut any thread, right? I'm just going to pull it away. My thread is still there. And I'm going to move my fabric, my binding up to where now we've got this angle of fabric, right? Got this, what is that, a 45-degree angle? And then I'm going to take it and flip it straight down. Now my thread is still attached, right? I haven't cut the thread. So then I'm going to take, and of course it's in my other bag, my thread is still attached. I'm going to move all this stuff underneath everything and push it to the back. I usually have a stiletto do that, not a pair of tweezers. And then I'm going to put my presser foot down. And I am going to do a couple like little back tacking stitches just to secure that corner. And then I'm going to continue. And that's how I do my corners. There's like 10 different ways to do a corner, and that's how I do mine. Now it's important that when you're doing your binding, you don't want to pull. You don't need to pull on this, because if you pull on this, this will make it taut right here, and then it'll make your quilt curl, if you will. So just lay it flat and let the feed dogs of the machine do their work. And because I have my walking foot engaged, then the fabric is being fed evenly. A walking foot is also called an even feed foot. There we go. That's about a 1/4 inch away from the edge. Now I'm going to put my presser foot up. I'm going to rotate again. Rotated everything. It's looking good. I love this for the border or for the binding. And then I'm going to raise my needle up and take this out of the edge there. Now I'm going to be doing that little trick where I do a 45-degree angle and I put it down. Right? And then I take, this is supposed to be my stiletto. I want to move all of that thread behind. Now you can cut the thread, like, you know, make like a little knot and cut the thread. I just don't. I just move it behind. And then when I put it back, I'm going to start sewing where it's about a 1/4 inch away from the edge. So I put my presser foot down, I get started, and I do a couple back stitches just to set it, and then I continue. See, there's my seam. I got pretty close to the edge, but worked out. Oh, it worked out. All right, so now I'm going to go ahead and cut the thread. And let me show you how I join the binding. I'm going to get rid of some of this excess. I have way too much, obviously. So let me get rid of the excess. Let me show you how I do that. So I have this piece right here and this piece right here. I want them to meet kind of in the middle. Like this is where I want it to join. So I'm going to get my little pin that I've packed away. Let me go get it. I really need to unpack. Or just have 2 of everything. I'm just using a friction pin. So here's where it came together. And so I'm just butting it up together. Right, there's no slack. There's no overlap. I'm just butting it up together. And I'm going to make, there is a fold there, so I don't have to mark this, but I'm going to. So I'm going to cut this part off. Okay, this is where it's meeting. I'm going to cut that part off. I'm not going to cut the other part, okay, because I need an overlap. And I need an overlap the width of this binding, okay? And so I can use this binding to determine how much more of it I need, okay? So this binding laid right next to this piece, this extra, right where the fold is. So there's the fold. I'm putting the edge of the fold to the edge of the width of this fabric, and then I'm going to make a mark. You could also use a ruler, and like, you know, my binding was 2.5 inches, so that length or that distance is 2.5 inches. And if I found my ruler in here, I could measure that just to confirm that that is 2.5 inches exactly. Okay, so if you don't have a ruler, just use the binding that you're cutting off. That's just kind of a neat thing to do. And then I'm going to cut where I marked at. That's 2.5, and then this is just extra. All right. Now this is kind of the tricky part. So I'm going to undo some of this stitching right here. Okay, I need a little bit more room because I'm going to be opening this up, and I want it to lay nice and flat. And because I have it stitched right here, it won't lay nice and flat unless I force the issue. So I'm going to use my little seam ripper. I'm just going to rip a couple seams, or a couple stitches, I should say. Not a whole bunch, but just a couple. And then I'm going to get a wonder clip, and I'm going to take my wonder clip, and I'm going to cinch that up, right? I'm going to get this bulk out of the way. So now what I'm facing is these two pieces, and this whole bulk is out of the way. So now all I have to do is join these two pieces. And I like to do it in this way. Let me show you. So I like to look at it from this direction, because the other way seems backwards to me. So I take this side, the right side, and I open that up, and the fold is coming up towards me, right? And then I take, let me just set that so it stays. And then this side, the left side, I'm going to open that up, and so the folds are actually coming onto each other like this, right? Here's the fold and here's the fold, both facing me. I'm going to take the fold that's on the left and face it towards the fold that's on the right. And then I'm going to align the corner, this corner right here. I'm just going to put a pin right here like this. And then I'm just aligning everything, because my fabric is exactly the length that it needs to be. I'm not going to trim after this except for the excess. Like, I'm not going to trim over here. I'm not going to trim over here. I'm going to make a stitch mark right here. So I'm going to go from the top. Of course, I can't find my pin. I'm going to go to the top right here. I'm making a little mark because I can't see underneath. And then I'm going to come to the edge. And I'm going to use my line, that line on my sewing mat, on my grid glider, to help me with that. So let's put this underneath the needle. And it's a little tricky with this guy, right? I don't need the 1/4 inch foot. I'm going to take this off real quick, switch it out, because this guide is going to get in my way for this step. So I'm going to get my straight stitch foot back, pop that guy off. There we go. Okay. And then I've got my little mark right here, and I've got my little mark right there, and I'm going to align it on this line. I could also have drawn a line with a ruler, either way. So if you don't have a grid glider or a marking on your table, then you can use a line. You can just draw a sewing line. Now before I trim off this excess, I want to open it up and make sure I did it right and that I have enough fabric, or I don't have too much, right? So I'm going to take off this clip. I'm going to open this up, and I'm going to set this down and make sure that I don't have like a bunch of extra and I don't have too little. But that looks like it's going to lay real nice. Let me show you overview. See? That's going to lay real nice. I'm going to get rid of this extra right here by cutting it, but that's going to lay just perfect. Just perfect. So let me trim this extra off. Get my scissors. Now I'm just eyeballing this, but I'm getting a 1/4 inch away from that line of stitching that I just made. Now you could go back to your ironing board and you could press the seam open, but what I'm going to do, because I have my seam roller right here with me, I'm just going to open this up and roll that seam open. Okay, and then I'm going to flip this over, lay that down, and I'm going to roll this part of this seam. I'm going to remind the fabric that that's how I want that to lay. So now I'm going to pop my seam allowance, or my 1/4 inch seam foot, back on. Just a real quick swap. That's what I love about these machines that swap out so quickly. You can just swap them out, no problem. if I can get it aligned. There we go. Love it. All right. Very nice. That worked out good. So now that this binding is on, I need to turn it over and sew it to the back. And I'm going to use a special foot for that. And I'm also going to trim off my little corners. I don't want to have these little corners get in my way, so I'm going to go ahead and trim those now. Just a little tiny notch, right? Get those corners off of there. Then I'm going to take this back over to the ironing board, and I'm going to press that binding away from the quilt. You don't have to do that, but I kind of like to do that. It's kind of part of my process. All right. Take all those little corners, and let's go over to the ironing board real quick and press this. Now we're going to switch out our foot. Now, like I was saying, this machine comes with a ton of different feet. And I've been, you know, kind of messing around with the different feet. Let's look and see what we've got here. Okay, so, you know, it has a different plate for straight stitching. It also has a different foot for it too, which is, a lot of machines have the plate for it, but a lot of them, I don't even think any of them have a different feed dog system. That's really good for free motion quilting and straight stitching. But this one is meant for zigzag. Not that we're doing that, but okay. It's this is the foot that I've been using. I don't even know what it's called. If I figure it out, I'll put it in the comments. But it has an R on it. It has this little flange thing right here in the middle. And so I'm thinking it's right-sided something. I'll probably need to look at the instruction manual. But what I like about it is that I line up, I can adjust my needle, my placement for my needle. So I'm going to move my needle over a little bit. I'm lining up the middle of my, let me show you. I'll be lining up this little flange with this part of the bobbin, right, or the binding. And so that's going to be my guide, and I'm going to scooch my needle over just a little bit. So hopefully that makes sense. I'll show you. Let me take that off. All right, so I'm going to flip this over, giving myself a nice fold on the back there. So I'm just flipping it over, and then I'm going to raise my presser foot just a little bit more to get past all this. All right, now I've got my presser foot down. Let's take a look. I've got my flange. This little flange guy right there is snug right up next to my binding edge. And when my needle goes down, let's take a look. I'm going to put my needle down. It's over too far, if you ask me. I feel like it's going over too far. So I'm going to lift that back up. My machine has a thing where you can change your needle position. And so I'm going to do that. Let me show you what that looks like. So just as a reminder, I'm using the Juki DX4000 Kokachi. So you just press on the needle position on the screen, and then the middle knob, if you twist it right then left, it will change the needle position on, where your needle is going to be coming down into your project. Now the middle position is 3.5, but I needed it to be adjusted a little bit over. So let's try this position. Let's try it at, what do I have this at, 3.0, and let's see what that looks like. So I'm going to put my needle in the down position right here. Let's take a close-up look to see how that's going to be. And I think, yeah, that's just on the other side of the binding, so I think that's going to be perfect. So we'll keep that at that needle position, and I love this feature for adjusting your position. I'm going to slow down also. Now I'm not really having to do too much. Let's see, did I catch everything? Yes, I'm catching it. It's kind of on the edge. I'm going to get this corner ready before I come up too much further. I want to get this ready before I come up to it. I'm just going to use a few clips for this. Do this on each corner. I have to do this ahead of time, give myself enough room. So I've got it all folded over nice, and then give myself a little finger press, and then I come down and fold it down to give a nice mitered corner. Okay, so I'm going to use my clip to hold this part, and this part. Okay, so now it looks like that, and I'm going to keep sewing, and I'll take these clips out once I come up to them. All right. I'm just holding everything down. Right in the middle there. All right. So my needle is right in the corner. I'm going to lift up my presser foot and pivot the quilt. All right. And then I'm going to put my presser foot down, and I'm going to continue sewing. That looks good from both sides. I'll show you in just a second when we get past it. All right, so now what I'm doing is I'm just folding this edge before I come up to it. I'm not using clips, I'm just holding it here, giving myself a runway and just holding the edge. And I'm going to continue to do that. When I get to be about right here, I'm going to give myself a clip to remind myself to fix this corner before I get too close to it. All right, this is the last edge, and I'm getting ready to meet up where I started. And there's really nothing special to that. Just want to make sure that I don't have any folds or ripples where it joins, or at least where the stitches meet. All right, let's take a look at the back side of this, see if I missed any spots. I've got some thread maintenance to do here, but it looks like I caught it all the way around, right? It's always something that I worry about when I'm quilting from, or when I'm sewing it down from the front. Am I going to catch the back? And I did. Yay. And it looks really nice on the front too. Nice and flat. It's not curling up. So if I wanted to, I could add like a hanging sleeve or something like that. But I have a perfect spot for this in my dining room. I'm not sure if I'm going to use this particular one in my dining room because the colors are a lot different, but definitely this pattern. So I'm really happy with how that binding turned out. And here's another close-up of the finished mini quilt, and just to show you the back. See how that caught everything real nice? And a close-up, you can't really even see the stitches right there. They're really buried right next to that binding. So that worked out really well by just moving over the needle and using that special foot. Now, this mini quilt will be available on my website, and this particular quilt block, or a rendition of it, I have a blog post article about how you make that. So if you just want to try the quilt block, you can go check that out online, and then the pattern will be available. It's just a really fun mini quilt, and I love the straight line quilting and how that binding turned out. Yep, I just love it. You guys, this was so much fun to make and super easy. It's just a really easy mini quilt to make. So I hope you try to make that yourself, and thanks so much for joining me on my Wednesday live shows. If you like what you saw or learned something today, if you'll press the like button and maybe even share with your sewing friends. I try to get here every Wednesday at 10 a.m. Central. So join me, subscribe to my channel, get notifications. If you sign up for my email, then you might even get notified that I'm coming live. So thanks again for joining me, and we'll see you next time. Bye.